Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to First Center for Spiritual Living in New York. I see some of the people on the Zoom call, and of course, I always welcome you. I'm reminded to welcome the people on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, where we have a few hundred people watching every week. As I was preparing today's lesson, I was thinking, how long have I actually been teaching this material? And I was doing rough math using my fingers, and I think the magic number is 34. I think it's 34 years I've been doing a weekly gathering or class. It's a long time to be presenting Louise Hay information, right? I started doing it in Miami when someone gave me a cassette that was meant for somebody else, and as it works out, down the end of the street on Bayshore Drive, there was a church and a marquee that said, "You can heal your life." Within a week or two of me moving there, and 9 months later, the person who had been facilitating that group was going to move to Tampa, I believe, and asked me if I would facilitate that group. And I didn't think it was my thing, quite honestly, because I was in a whole different field. But I knew there was a need, and I saw what I consider to be miracles happening by people who were really working with Louise Hay's material. I didn't know that she was a Science of Mind student. I didn't know she had anything to do with First Center for Spiritual Living, or formerly the First Church of Religious Science. There was a lot of things I didn't know 34 years ago, to be honest. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I experienced with some very simple ideas that would change my life and can change people's lives, and has been changing people's lives ever since. I wouldn't know that a book like this could sell 66 million copies. I wouldn't know that it's impacted over 100 million people in languages all over the globe. And how could I ever predict that I would be the pastor of the center in New York some 30 years later? I mean, that's all too much for a guy that was just going down the street to listen to a group. But that's exactly how it happened. And over the years, I've taken lots of other courses and pursued other degrees and a master's and couple different things, studying religions all over the world. And you might wonder, what is his preoccupation with that book and that material? Well, I'll tell you very simply. It's because she breaks it down, the metaphysical approach to life, in such a simple way. I think I could teach it to a 6-year-old. It's, Louise Hay would say it's all very simple. She said it from the very beginning. And it's as simple then as it is now. It's simple. And it isn't necessarily easy, because the responsibility is always going to be ours to do the work and to do the spiritual work. So I've got 52 lessons. I probably have more than that, a lesson for every week of the year. And I'm always engaged in this healing discussion. And sure, I could probably present material from Emerson and some of the Science of Mind classes and lots of different places where I could take you to the same place, but I can't think of anything that will take you to a deeper place than just doing the work. I don't know why there's a resistance to change. I've not figured that out yet, but I know there's great resistance in most people to do anything differently. Haven't figured that out yet. So we gather tonight on all these different platforms, and we're teaching a timeless message about self-love and building self-esteem, and teaching people that there's a power and that there's a presence in you, operating through you all of the time. It responds to your every single thought. So we start knowing that. And I'll go a little bit into my lesson, and then we'll have a break where I figure the best part of the talk is where people can share with us what's going on with them, and possibly get some feedback and some insight. When I first started doing this group years ago, there were some group agreements. That's when people were dealing with a lot of illness. And this is not a group where we're here to tell people what to do ever. It's a group where we consider some healing principles that we can adopt that will help change our lives. So as we go into the second part of the session, then people can share what it's been like for them in consciousness. And by that, I'm always asking, what have your predominant thoughts been? Because your predominant thinking is the very thing that's creating your life, whether you know it or not. This would be a great time also to say, for those of you who are watching on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, you can send a message in to us and we'll send you a link so you can join us on the Zoom call. Because the people who are listening to the lessons on the other platforms, they don't have the opportunity of interacting with us. So if you send us your request, we'll invite you, and then we can also invite you to other lessons as we have them in other spirit groups. So I was reading some poetry this week for this lesson. I've come back to Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and we all know that this famous poem, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." I'm sure you've heard it. But before that, I was reading different things she wrote, and then there's a quote that followed one of her writings where she says, "Love doesn't just make the world go round. Love is what makes the ride worthwhile." I thought that was kind of nice. Some of the greatest pieces of literature have been written about love, romantic love in particular. Then, of course, love for life itself and love of man. And I was caught up with a poem by E.E. Cummings called Undefined, and then Shakespeare's Sonnet 116 today. And then came back again to Elizabeth Barrett Browning's most passionate, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." And I was thinking, and I've found this poem once before, for those of you coming into a class like this, you might want to use some of the very ideas in that one poem to passionately start to appreciate the good and the beauty around you and in you. This would be a healing activity. I'm certain many of the passionate phrases that she wrote in that poem, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways," would lift you and bring you to places in consciousness. Our teaching is ultimately about waking up from the dream, and the dream would be from other spiritual books. The illusion is that you're living in separation. The illusion is it's dog-eat-dog world. The illusion is them and us. And the truth is going to be that you live, move, and have your being in consciousness, and that you're one with everything that lives, and you're one with everyone, and the truth is that you're a thinking being in the mind of this divine energy. You're alive and you're awakening. But most people don't know that. They don't live from that place. They think there's other guys out there and other people, bad people and good people, and most people are caught up in a lot of stories. And we would call that in our language, they're caught up in the world of separation. And as you come into a teaching like this, a metaphysical teaching, you learn about the idea of there being a unitary field, or you'll hear the word oneness kicked around a lot, that there's one power, one life, and that is your life now. And you'll begin to learn to love your brother as yourself, because you'll wake up to the fact that everything and everyone is a part of you, and that we're all connected. So here we are at the First Center for Spiritual Living, New York City. Louise Hay, again, was our most famous student. Again, she made a huge contribution to the whole New Thought movement, reaching hundreds of millions of people, and establishing the Hay House, where many of the authors, New Thought authors of the past 30 years were published. With Louise, She said, self-appreciation and self-love is where we begin. And what we talk about always is the dialogue that matters most, the ongoing dialogue, the creative dialogue. And that's the dialogue, as I said before, that is going on with you all the time. In the world, there's a lot of suffering, needless suffering, stemming always from false ideas that I'm not enough. Most people do not feel really great and wonderful about themselves. So as I come back to my poem for today's lesson, I got ahead of myself a little bit. You might ask yourself, how do I love you? How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Can you even think of asking that question of yourself? How do you love yourself? Can you count the ways? And the suggestion would be write it down in a journal, a bit of a gratitude journal. It would be a very powerful exercise. I've told people in some of my classes before, for a year and a half, I worked in a facility with people that were getting out of prison. And it was a very punitive system, but I was a therapist, and I worked with some guys for about 6 months, and they were hard characters, and they weren't grateful for much. And I kind of was focused. I knew that the punitive approach wasn't working. So over time, I got every one of them to be working, convincing them there must be something you're grateful for. And over time, I got a group of men to create a list of things that they were grateful for. And this ties into that idea of how do I love thee? Because once you start to talk and think about what pleases you, what makes you happy, you're going to lift that conversation out of wherever it's been to a different and more powerful place. Could you say to yourself, I love you, like Barrett, the poet, Browning? Could you say, I love you to the depth, to the breadth, to the height that my very soul can reach? I'd like you to think about loving yourself that much, to the depth, to the breadth, to the height that your soul can reach. I love you freely, I love you purely, without remorse, without regret, without judgment. I love you with each breath, with each smile. As you think of yourself and all you've been through in your life, no matter if you're 20 or you're 40 or you're 80 or whatever it is, as you think of your life and all the challenges and things that you have surmounted and overcome, can you love yourself with every tear and every moment and every memory? Love yourself and think of yourself as the precious one. You can take that poem, it's an extraordinary poem, and read it to yourself and form a bit of a gratitude list like I did with those guys some decades ago. As I had these gentlemen work on that, I saw changes in them that it was astounding, quite honestly. The director of the program called me in the office and wanted to know what I was doing with her people, because they were all so involved in everything and they were very different than the rest. And that's just an example of the kind of power that you have within you as you begin to have a shift in consciousness and you learn to love yourself. How can I love thee? Let me count the ways. And ask yourself those kinds of questions. Because a lot of what goes on with people is self-condemnation and guilt and shame and more guilt and I'm not good enough and not good enough. And then we have this terrible habit of blaming other people for everything too. And all of that is the unhealed things that are within us that we project upon others. So we come together at the center in all of our activities every Sunday, every Thursday, and in our spiritual groups to create a place where we remind you that there is a beauty, there's a presence, and it's within you. And it's not off in the clouds, right? It's within you. And you can fan that divine flame that's in you, and you can learn to release all the negative stuff, the old ideas, the false ideas, and you can live in a different world, and you can operate from a higher place of understanding. This center in New York and all of our activities are here to allow you to reach up and operate from a different place, a different understanding, and have a higher realization of your value and your worth. And come from the realization that you can come from this place where you know that everything in life is filled with this creative energy, and that you have power available to you, and you can learn how to use it here. What's required of you? Not a great deal, really. It's all very simple, right? But you plug in, you stay plugged in. No matter what, you stay plugged in, and you keep reminding yourself of the truth of who you are. Because the whole world is working against you. In the world, it's all about who's right, who's wrong, and you're not enough, and try to get ahead, and all competition. And the world of truth, the world of spirit, is different. It's a world where you are supplied and supported all the time. There's a part of you very deep in your being that knows this. The spirit which is within you is always, as Emerson used to say, wooing you and encouraging you to connect and step up. Louise Hay herself, in one of the songs that are associated with the textbook, it was a CD, there was a song, the lyric went, remembering and forgetting. It's the game that we play. When we're in a place of remembrance of truth, you know that you are as God created you, in the light and the love and the glory, and you know that all is well. And you allow yourself to begin to trust life. And you tap into this power. And if you get involved in our classes to any extent, you will understand what Dr. Holmes said when he said there's power, for good in the universe, and you can use it. You can use it because you are, in fact, an individualization of this very power. You are one with the one, and you have tremendous power at your disposal. Most of us are not using our power constructively. Most of us have got an inner dialogue or inner chatter of what's wrong and what's wrong with me. And we're not learning to count how we love thee. We're not focusing on our many gifts, and we're not coming from gratitude. So that healing dialogue, that inner conversation, awaits your fine-tuning, it awaits your, overhaul. There's so many books and so many lessons that we teach to support this message. One of the ones I've been talking a little bit about lately comes from Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. So we understand that we live in this field of creative energy, this source, this love, and we learn that we have power that we can use. And from Don Miguel, we learned that we don't take anything personally. You are a center of God activity. You have the ability to create and live and to step up and to live in a world that's so different and so beautiful. And along the way, there's going to be all kinds of people, I promise you, that are not going to necessarily understand you. They're not going to necessarily behave. And you're not here you're here to grow and evolve, right? And what people do and how they behave really isn't any of your problem. There was a book by Terry Cole Whitaker that was entitled, What You Think of Me Is None of My Business. So when you're on a spiritual trajectory and you're learning to love yourself, you're going for self-approval in the now, or the keys to all positive changes. So throughout the week, as you pay attention to your dialogue, I invite you to really look at where you're being negative and where you're being critical. See, we have great minds, analytical minds, and the whole thing with great analytical minds is we're always tearing things apart. It's the very root of the word, analyzing. We're, dissecting things. When we're coming at things from a spiritual approach, we're here to see what's good. We're here to see what's good in people. We're here to see what's good in life. We're here to count the things that are good about ourselves. A practitioner of this teaching practices seeing the good. That's our focus. If you keep focusing on seeing the presence and the God or the good, that's what you're going to see. So I'm getting close to the point where I usually break and I ask the question about your inner dialogue. What has it been like, right, this week? What is the conversation with that person who's most important? Because that conversation that you're having all the time is the very conversation that's creating your tomorrows. The conversation that's running in you this Thursday is probably shaping this weekend for you in the days to come. Are you honoring yourself, or are you being critical of yourself? Are you living each day where you're aware, or is your day just going by with no consciousness, no conscious awareness? A lot of people get up in the morning and they find themselves going to sleep and they haven't really been awake in their life. They're doing everything by rote. And we invite you to slow down a little bit and savor the moments and be a little bit more mindful in your activities when you start out in the morning. And in the morning, connect with Source through meditation or prayer, and just take the time to connect and realize that I'm a thinking being. I'm a center within this mind of God, this heart of God. This center, First Church, it was called, in New York, is where Louise Hay learned to live the affirmative life and where she learned to practice. And this is what we offer every week, several times a week, an opportunity to remember how to love yourself or begin to love yourself, and how important that conversation that you're having, how important it is. So when I ask that question, what's it like being you, I'm really never asking what your story is, because everybody's got, a life full of things. What I'm asking you is, when I ask what it's been like, I'm asking you, are you paying attention to what that whole inner mantra, that inner dialogue is like? Because it is the dialogue that matters for you. And to the extent that that conversation's on high, elevated to a high place, to the extent you're being the guardian at the gate of your own conversation, then things are going to really work out well for you. But if you're living in a world of reaction and you're making your life about other people and what they're doing and what's wrong and all of that, then you're creating a hellish experience for yourself to varying degrees. To the extent that you're practicing this teaching and you're coming from connection, you're being a lifter. Because if you're preoccupied with seeing the good, I promise you, you're a force for good in the world. And if you're preoccupied seeing the good, you're a force for good in your own life. Louise Hay said, all healing is self-healing. And she commented, of all the hundreds, if not thousands of people I've ever spoken to and counseled with, she said, when you get to the bottom line with any and all, she'll say it'll all come down to people not feeling very good about who they are and what they're doing with their lives. They feel like they're a fraud, or they're not satisfied. They're not living up to the potential. They're not even living. And whatever they are, they don't feel like they're enough. And again, where does all that inner dialogue come from? I'm not enough, and I don't do enough, and all that stuff. And I'll tell you squarely, it comes from our childhood. It comes from all the stuff we've learned. And as I've said in previous lessons, it doesn't matter where it came from as much as what you're going to do with it. You can be resolved. Look, enough is enough. Enough is enough, meaning starting today, I'm going to be here now. I'm not going to keep living out my childhood over and over again. I'm not going to keep marrying the same person, the same problem. I'm going to drop it. And I'm going to be the guardian at the gate, and I'm going to know, and I'm going to find ways to love myself. I'm going to count the ways, and I'm going to love myself with passion and generosity, and I'm going to keep lifting my spirit up. Because if we do that, you're going to be lifting everybody else up eventually. I remember an old bumper sticker, first love yourself, the others will follow. And I laughed when I saw it. It was true, though. If you're loving yourself, then everything's going to work out. First things first. The old way when we were kids, maybe coming out of old religions, is we're trying to go help the world and help everybody, and we were told that our rewards would come later and all of that. We're here telling you just the opposite. Love yourself and have compassion for everybody else, because they're all doing the best that they can, every last person, with the information, the understanding, and the awareness that they have. So it was explained to me some 30 years ago that we're all, again, evoluting along. Don't judge another person wherever they are. You don't know what their journey has been. And be very grateful that you know what you know. And because you know what you know, it would be really intelligent to practice it, right? If you have this tremendous power at your disposal, why would you not use it, right? Why would you continue to use it destructively? When you have the keys to the kingdom, you have the ability to create a fantastic life experience and share the light with everybody. So that's our intention. That's what we do here. We'll see you at the other side of the break, and you can share, if you'd like, what you're doing regarding that important conversation. Thank you.